On the 4th of March, 2025, 3 women were found dead in the canyon country of southern Utah. 2 on a hiking trail and 1 at a home in Wayne County. Tonight, their story. Wayne County, Utah, is one of the least densely populated counties in the entire state of Utah. A vast and quiet expanse of land in the south-central part of the state where the Colorado Plateau stretches out in layers of red and orange and cream-colored sandstone, where the sky seems wider than it does almost anywhere else in the country, where silence is not the absence of sound, but its own presence, its own particular texture that fills the air in the way that weather fills it. And Wayne County is home to some of the most extraordinary natural landscapes in the American West, including Capitol Reef National Park, which sits in the very heart of the county and draws visitors from across the country and around the world, who come to walk among the ancient stone formations and to hike the trails that wind through canyonlands that have taken millions of years to become what they are today. And Canyonlands National Park extends into the county's outermost edges as well, adding to the overwhelming sense that this is a place where the earth itself is the main character, where human settlement is small and careful and surrounded on all sides by something ancient and enormous that predates every name we have given to it, and the small communities of Torrey and Lyman, which lie within Wayne County and which would be named in connection with this investigation, are the kinds of places that most Americans have never visited, and that the people who live there have chosen with genuine intention. Because you do not end up in Torrey, Utah, by accident or by default. You go there because you love the land, because you want to live close to something that the modern world has not yet managed to diminish or standardize or reduce. And Torrey sits at an elevation of around 6,800 feet above sea level. And in early March, the temperature in this part of Utah is cold, often dropping below freezing at night. And the landscape in those first days of March 2025 would have been held in the particular stillness of late winter. The trails that wind through the surrounding high desert terrain, carrying the compressed quiet of a season not yet ready to release into something warmer. And Wayne County's population is genuinely small, numbering only a few thousand people spread across an enormous geographic area, which means that communities like Torrey and Lyman function as villages in the truest and oldest sense of that word. Places where people know each other's names and faces and histories, where news travels quickly through the informal channels of a close community, where a crime of the magnitude of what was discovered on March 4th sends a shock through everyone at once. The way a stone dropped in still water sends its ripple all the way to the edge, and the county is also a gateway community for some of the most visited hiking destinations in the American Southwest, drawing outdoor enthusiasts and nature lovers from across the country who come specifically for the trails that thread through the red rock terrain, trails that offer solitude and the particular satisfaction of moving through a landscape that has not been made easier or safer or more convenient for human comfort. And it was on one such trail in the Torrey area that 2 of the women in tonight's story were found. And the Sevier County Sheriff's Office was also involved in the investigation, suggesting that the scope of what happened crossed county lines and required the coordinated response of multiple law enforcement jurisdictions, and the Utah Department of Public Safety, a state-level agency overseeing multiple bureaus, including the Utah State Bureau of Investigation, took the lead in coordinating the broader multi-agency response. And the Utah Crime Lab was called in to process the 2 crime scenes in the Lyman and Torrey areas, which speaks to the immediate seriousness with which authorities classified this case from its very first moments. And the physical terrain of Wayne County, as beautiful as it is, presents unique and genuine challenges for law enforcement. Because the distances between locations are vast and the population is sparse, and the landscape, while magnificent, does not make investigation easy in the way that more densely populated areas do. And yet the response to what was found on March 4th was swift and thorough, and ultimately resulted in an arrest within less than 24 hours. And I want you to stay with me as we move through this story slowly and carefully. The rain outside continuing to fall gently and steadily as we do. And we begin here in this wide red rock country, in this landscape of extraordinary silence and beauty, with 3 women whose lives we will try to honor with all the care that they deserve. The 3 women who were found dead on March 4th, 2025, in Wayne County, Utah, had not yet been publicly identified at the time this story was reported, as next of kin notifications were still in the process of being completed. And we will honor that process fully by not speculating about their names or their specific personal identities. But we can and we should speak thoughtfully about who they were as human beings, as women at 3 very different and meaningful stages of life. Because their ages alone tell us something real and important about the lives they had lived and about the lives that still lay ahead of them. And the first of the 3 women was in her 30s. And to be a woman in your 30s is to be at a particular kind of crossroads in life. A time when the things you began building in your 20s are being tested and refined, and sometimes rebuilt from the ground up with greater clarity and greater purpose. When careers are deepening and personal relationships are maturing, and a person begins to understand themselves with a precision that early adulthood does not always make available. And a woman in her 30s who chooses to hike trails in the canyon country of southern Utah on a Wednesday afternoon in early March is a woman who has made choices that reflect a specific and meaningful set of values, a love of the outdoors, and a comfort with physical challenge, and an appreciation for the kind of beauty that demands something from you in exchange for what it offers. And she had a future ahead of her that extended decades, that contained within it everything she had not yet done, and everyone she had not yet met, and everything she had not yet become. And she was building something the way people in their 30s build things, with intention and with increasing confidence in their own capacity. And that future was taken from her on March 4th. And the second woman was in her 60s. And to be a woman in your 60s in the American West, and specifically in a community like those that surround Wayne County, is often to be someone who has made a considered and deeply intentional choice to live close to the land. someone who has spent a lifetime developing a relationship with the natural world, and who carries that relationship into every decade and every season of her life. And women in their 60s who hike trails in remote terrain are women who know their bodies and trust them, who have decades of experience moving through the natural world, and who do not take that experience for granted. And the fact that she was found on that trail is evidence of an active and engaged life. A life that was not winding down or retreating inward, but was still fully present in the physical world and in the experiences that the physical world makes possible. And she too had years ahead of her. Years shaped by the depth and the perspective that 6 full decades of living provides, and that no younger person can fully replicate. And the third woman was in her 80s. And there is something that truly deserves to be said about a woman who has lived 8 full decades, who has watched the world change in ways that would have been entirely unimaginable in her childhood, who has carried within her 8 decades of love and loss and difficulty and grace and the accumulated texture of a life fully lived. And the woman in her 80s was found at a residence in Wayne County, which means she was at home, in the space that was hers, in the physical container of her daily life, and her belongings and her routines. And to be at home is the most ordinary and most personal thing in the world. And there is a particular tenderness in the image of an 80-year-old woman in her own home, surrounded by the evidence of her own life, living the kind of quiet afternoon that 80-year-old women in small Utah communities live. And she too had been someone's mother, perhaps, and someone's grandmother, perhaps, had accumulated the particular kind of knowledge and community presence that only comes with 8 full decades of being alive in one place and being woven into the fabric of that place. And all 3 of these women, at 30 and at 60 and at 80, were members of communities, were people that others knew and relied upon and cared for. And I want you to hold all 3 of them in your mind as we move through this story, to hold the span of their ages, which together represent something close to the full arc of a woman's life. And the rain outside continues to fall softly as we carry all 3 of them gently forward into the rest of this story. The relationships between the 3 women and any connection they may have had to the suspect had not been publicly disclosed by authorities at the time this story was reported. And we will not speculate about what those relationships might have been, because speculation presented as something more solid than what it is serves no one and can cause harm. And what we know is that 2 of the women were found together on a hiking trail, and one was found at a residence. And what we can thoughtfully consider is what those separate locations suggest about the circumstances of March 4th. And the fact that 2 women were on a trail together in a remote part of Wayne County on a March afternoon suggests a level of familiarity and a shared purpose between them. The kind of shared intention that brings 2 people to the same trail at the same time, whether that is friendship or a shared love of the outdoors or a planned excursion. And the 3rd woman was at home, which is to say she was in her own space, in the most private and personal of contexts, simply living the day as she lived every other day. And the investigation was working to connect these 3 locations and these 3 women through the evidence gathered at the scenes and through the path the suspect left as he departed the area. And it is significant that the vehicle investigators asked the public to help locate. The 2022 white Subaru Outback with the license plate U560YF was described by authorities as one of the alleged victims' vehicles, which means that the connection between the suspect and at least one of the three women extended to the victim's own property. And this detail, while limited in what it explicitly reveals, is part of the picture that investigators were building. And Wayne County is a small and genuinely tight-knit community. And in communities of this size, the loss of three members at once carries a weight that is qualitatively different from the weight experienced by larger communities. Because in a small community, everyone is connected to the people who are gone. Everyone's daily life was in some way shaped by the presence of the people who have now been taken. And the Wayne County School District's decision to cancel classes for the rest of the week following the discovery speaks directly to this community character. A school district making the judgment that the safety and the emotional well-being of its students and staff required a full and complete pause. A recognition that what had happened was significant enough to warrant stepping outside the ordinary schedule of the school week and giving the community the space to process what it was facing. And school districts are practical institutions that do not make decisions like this easily or without serious consideration. And the decision here was made quickly and without ambiguity. And that speed reflects how completely and immediately the events of March 4th had disrupted the ordinary life of this community. And I want you to pause here for just a moment and sit with that, with the image of a small Utah town on a March morning. The school bus is not running, the classrooms standing, empty. The families at home processing something that none of them had any reason to expect, and the rain outside continues to fall as we do, steadily and without urgency. And the guidance that authorities gave to residents while the suspect was still at large, advising people to lock their doors and remain at home or with others, and to stay alert to anything unusual in their surroundings, and to report suspicious activity to 911, is guidance that underscores the disruption to the ordinary texture of life in a place where people generally move through their days with a sense of safety and openness. And the rain falls, and we move forward into the events of March 4th. On the afternoon of Wednesday, March 4th, 2025, dispatch received a call about two women found deceased on a hiking trail in the Wayne County area of southern Utah. And that call set in motion a response from multiple agencies that would unfold over the next 24 hours and would eventually cross 3 state lines before concluding in a Colorado mountain town in the early hours of March 5th. And the trail where the two women were found sits in a part of the country that is known specifically for its beauty and for the quiet it offers to those who seek it. A landscape of layered sandstone and juniper, and the particular silence of the high desert in the last cold weeks of winter, and the discovery of two deceased women on a trail in this setting would have been profoundly jarring to the first responders who arrived. Because this is not a landscape where tragedy of this kind is anticipated. It is a landscape where people come to find peace and perspective and the particular quality of renewal that comes from moving through a natural world that does not share our urgency or our timelines. And the officers and investigators who arrived at that trail on Wednesday afternoon found themselves managing a situation that required both speed and care simultaneously. The speed of an active homicide investigation and the care required to properly preserve a crime scene in a remote outdoor setting where the physical environment is itself a complicating factor. And as the investigation at the trail was being organized and the immediate scene work was beginning, a third piece of information emerged that expanded the scope of what law enforcement was dealing with. And that was the discovery of a third victim, a woman in her 80s, found deceased at a residence in Wayne County. And this additional discovery transformed what was already a deeply serious situation into something of even greater magnitude, a triple homicide investigation spanning multiple locations across a sparsely populated county in the canyon country of southern Utah. And the Utah Department of Public Safety coordinated the response, with the Sevier County Sheriff's Office actively involved, and the Utah State Bureau of Investigation was engaged, and the Utah Crime Lab was dispatched to process the 2 crime scenes in the Lyman and Torrey areas. And the breadth of this law enforcement response reflects the seriousness with which every agency involved treated this case from the very beginning, not as a single incident, but as something that demanded the full resources of multiple professional teams working in coordination. And while the investigation at the scenes was underway, it became clear that a suspect had departed the area, and authorities determined that the individual had left in a vehicle belonging to one of the victims, the 2022 white Subaru Outback. And the decision to share this information publicly, including the specific license plate number U560YF, was made with the intention of mobilizing the community as an additional set of eyes. And simultaneously, the Utah Department of Public Safety and the Sevier County Sheriff's Office issued guidance to residents of the Torrey and surrounding area to take precautions while the suspect remained at large, asking people to lock their doors, to stay home or stay with others, to be attentive to their surroundings, and to contact 911 if they observed anything that seemed suspicious or out of place. And I want you to stay with this moment, with the trail and the residents and the school district's announcement and the community holding itself still while law enforcement worked through the afternoon and into the night. And I want you to stay with the 3 women at the center of it. The woman in her 30s and the woman in her 60s found on that trail, and the woman in her 80s found at her home in Wayne County. And the rain falls softly outside, and we stay with them and we carry them forward. There were no publicly reported final words from the 3 women who were found on March 4th. No recorded conversation or written statement that could stand in the way that such things sometimes stand as the last evidence of a person's voice. And their identities remained protected while their families were being located and notified. And we honor that protection fully and without reservation. And yet the circumstances in which the 2 women were found on a hiking trail in the canyon country of Wayne County in early March. Speak quietly but clearly to something about who they were and how they chose to spend their time in the world. And the fact that they were on that trail was not coincidence or circumstance. It was a choice, a deliberate choice to be in that particular landscape, on that particular afternoon, to move through the cold and the quiet of a trail in late winter. And that choice tells us that they were women who valued the natural world, who drew something from it that could not be found elsewhere, who had a relationship with the outdoors that was personal and ongoing and meaningful. And the woman in her 80s was at home, in the most familiar and personal of all environments, simply living the afternoon in the way that she lived her afternoons. And there is a particular significance to the ordinary nature of her location, because it reminds us that March 4th was not, for any of these three women, a day that felt different from any other day, that none of them were carrying any awareness of what was coming, that all three of them were simply present in their lives, moving through the hours in the way that people move through hours when nothing special is expected. And this is one of the most profound aspects of any act of violence, that it arrives without warning into the middle of the ordinary, and the families receiving notification of what happened are being told something that nothing in life genuinely prepares you for, and the grief that a family carries when they learn that someone they love has died violently in a place they loved is a grief with multiple layers. The grief of the loss itself, and the grief of the way it happened, and the grief of all the ordinary moments that will never come again. And the rain falls, and we sit with those families gently and with great care, acknowledging the weight of what they are carrying right now. The investigation into the deaths of the three women in Wayne County, Utah, moved with a speed and a precision that reflected both the severity of what had happened and the professionalism of the agencies involved. And the Utah Department of Public Safety served as the coordinating authority, working closely with the Sevier County Sheriff's Office and with the Utah State Bureau of Investigation, which is the state's designated primary criminal investigative agency, specifically tasked with handling cases of significant complexity and cases that require investigative resources beyond what individual county agencies can provide on their own, and the Utah Crime Lab, which provides forensic science services to law enforcement agencies across the entire state, was deployed to process the two crime scenes in the Lyman and Torrey areas of Wayne County. And the work of processing outdoor crime scenes in remote terrain is work that requires particular expertise and particular patience, because the natural environment does not preserve evidence the way a controlled indoor scene might, because weather and exposure and the movement of animals through outdoor spaces can alter the physical evidence in ways that must be accounted for in how the scene is documented and collected. And the investigators working those two scenes on the afternoon and evening of March 4th would have worked methodically and carefully, documenting every detail with photographs and measurements and written records, collecting physical evidence according to strict chain of custody protocols that would ensure its admissibility in the legal proceedings that would follow, And while this careful work was ongoing at the scenes, a parallel track of the investigation was moving rapidly. The tracking of the suspect who had left the area in a vehicle belonging to one of the victims. And investigators were moving that vehicle through multiple information channels simultaneously, tracking it through the technological and surveillance infrastructure that modern law enforcement uses to locate moving vehicles across large geographic areas. And the Utah Department of Public Safety's public request for assistance in locating the white Subaru Outback was issued not because authorities lacked their own means of tracking the vehicle, but because community involvement adds eyes and coverage in areas where formal surveillance may be limited, and the vehicle was being tracked as it moved southward through the vast open spaces of southern Utah, a landscape where roads are long and straight, and the distances between towns are measured not in minutes, but in hours, and then into northern Arizona, where the terrain is similarly remote, and the highway infrastructure carries vehicles quickly across enormous distances with minimal population density, and ultimately into Colorado. And this multi-state flight covered hundreds of miles of the American Southwest across the course of a single day and night. And tracking a suspect across 3 states requires real-time coordination between multiple agencies and multiple jurisdictions, requires the instantaneous sharing of intelligence and the alignment of resources that belong to different agencies and different states. And this is precisely the kind of coordination that the American law enforcement system has invested significantly in improving over the past 2 decades. And in this case, that investment proved effective, because the vehicle was ultimately located abandoned in Pagosa Springs, Colorado, a small and beautiful community in the southwestern corner of Colorado, not far from the New Mexico border and not far from the San Juan Mountains, a place known for its natural hot springs and its outdoor recreation, a town that exists in some ways in the same relationship to the natural world that the Utah communities at the origin of this investigation exist in, small and surrounded by landscape that dwarfs the human presence within it. And Colorado law enforcement, acting on the information provided by the Utah agencies, located the abandoned vehicle in Pagosa Springs and conducted a search of the immediate area. And after a brief search, the individual was found and taken into custody without incident in the early hours of Thursday morning, March 5th, 2025, which is to say less than 24 hours after the initial call to dispatch had been received on the afternoon of March 4th. And the phrase "without incident" is one that carries real weight in this context, because the individual was being sought in connection with 3 deaths and had traveled across 3 states, and the ability of law enforcement to locate and apprehend him without a confrontation reflects both the quality of the operational planning and the professionalism of the officers involved. And I want you to pause here for just a moment and acknowledge the people who worked through the night on March 4th into March 5th, who coordinated across state lines and tracked a suspect through hundreds of miles of remote western landscape and brought him into custody before the sun came up. And the rain falls outside, and we acknowledge that work before we move into the legal process that followed. The arrest of the male suspect in Pagosa Springs, Colorado, in the early hours of March 5th initiated the formal legal process that will now unfold over the coming months, and the Sevier County Sheriff's Office described the case publicly as what authorities believe was a triple homicide. And in Utah, criminal homicide offenses are governed by the Utah Code, specifically Utah Code Annotated Title 76, Chapter 5, which covers all offenses against the person. And within that chapter, the most serious homicide charge is aggravated murder, defined under Section 76-5-202, as intentionally or knowingly causing the death of another person under circumstances that include one or more specific aggravating factors identified in the statute. And among those aggravating factors explicitly listed in Utah law is the killing of more than one person during a single criminal episode. And this aggravating factor, if established by the evidence, is directly applicable to the circumstances alleged in this case. And an aggravated murder conviction under Utah law is a capital felony, which represents the highest classification of criminal offense under Utah's criminal code. And it carries potential penalties, including life in prison with or without the possibility of parole. And in Utah, capital felony cases undergo a process of prosecutorial review to determine whether the death penalty will be sought, a decision that involves the specific facts of the case and the relevant statutory criteria, and the charging decisions in this investigation will ultimately rest with the prosecuting authority in the relevant counties. And those decisions will be guided by the evidence developed through the crime scene processing, through the forensic work of the Utah Crime Lab, through the findings of the medical examinations of the three women, and through the full investigative picture assembled by the Utah State Bureau of Investigation and the cooperating agencies. And the cause and manner of death for the three women had not been publicly disclosed at the time this story was reported. And this withholding of information is standard practice in the early stages of a serious homicide investigation, because the specific forensic findings related to cause of death form part of the prosecution's evidentiary strategy, and disclosing them prematurely can compromise the integrity of the legal process. And the process that follows an arrest in Utah includes an initial appearance before a magistrate within a specified time period, at which the charges are formally presented and a determination is made about pretrial release, followed by a preliminary hearing or a grand jury proceeding, at which the state must demonstrate probable cause to support the charges, and then a formal arraignment at which the defendant enters a plea, and then the lengthy and often complex pre-trial phase involving discovery and motions and the preparation of both the prosecution and the defense, and ultimately a trial if the case does not resolve through a plea agreement. And this process can extend over months or even years. And the families of the three women will have rights within this process under Utah's Victim Rights Act, including the right to be notified of proceedings, the right to be heard at sentencing and other hearings, and the right to be treated with dignity and respect throughout their involvement with the criminal justice system. And the fact that a suspect was in custody, and that there were, in the words of the Utah Department of Public Safety, no ongoing threats to the public and no outstanding suspects, meant that the community of Wayne County could begin the long work of grieving without the additional weight of ongoing physical danger. And we acknowledge the beginning of that process with care and with the understanding that the legal proceedings that follow are only the institutional dimension of a much larger and more personal reckoning that the families and the community are navigating. The news of what had been found in Wayne County, Utah, on the afternoon of March 4th spread through local media and then through national outlets with the speed that serious criminal cases involving multiple victims always travel in the age of instant communication, and the Utah Department of Public Safety's press releases provided the formal structure of the official information being shared, and local outlets including KUTV, the CBS affiliate serving the Utah market, were among the first to amplify and contextualize the official information for a regional audience. And the Sevier County Sheriff's Office used its official Facebook page to communicate directly with the public during the hours when the suspect was still at large, and then again when the arrest was confirmed. And this direct social media communication has become a standard and important part of how law enforcement agencies keep communities informed during active situations, allowing information to reach people who may not be watching television or listening to the radio, but who will see a post from their local sheriff's office appear in their feed. And the public request to help locate the white Subaru Outback was widely shared across social media platforms by community members who understood that the more eyes on the vehicle, the faster it would be found. And the national media picked up the story relatively quickly, drawn by the particular combination of factors: 3 women of 3 different generations, a remote and beautiful landscape, a multi-state manhunt that ended in a Colorado resort town, and the Wayne County School District's announcement that classes were canceled for the rest of the week communicated to anyone reading it something important about the severity of what had occurred. Because school closures are not decisions that administrators make lightly, and the district's statement that the cancellation was out of an abundance of caution and concern for student and public safety was an honest and direct communication to families about the nature of the situation and the community response to the hours of uncertainty while the suspect was at large was one that combined the natural fear of an unresolved threat with the equally natural solidarity of a small community that knows how to look out for itself and for its neighbors. And the confirmation of the arrest in the early hours of March 5th brought genuine relief to a community that had spent the night in a state of elevated alertness. And the rain falls, and we acknowledge both the grief and the relief of the community of Wayne County. And we hold both of those things gently as we move forward. One of the things that the story of March 4th in Wayne County, Utah, invites us to consider carefully and practically is the question of personal safety in outdoor and remote settings. And we raise this not to discourage anyone from hiking or from spending time in the natural world, which is a fundamental and deeply valuable human activity, but because there are practices that can meaningfully improve safety for people who spend time on trails and in remote landscapes. And the women who were on that trail in Wayne County We're exercising a freedom that is real and important and that should be protected, and the vast majority of the time it is safe. And the canyon country of southern Utah is a place of extraordinary gift, and it deserves to be experienced fully and without fear. And yet, the events of March 4th remind us that awareness and preparation are always worthwhile. And one of the most important safety practices for anyone hiking in remote terrain is to inform someone of your plans before you go. To tell a trusted person where you are going, which trail you will be on, when you expect to return, and what to do if you do not check in by a certain time. And this simple practice creates a record of your intended location and gives someone outside your hiking party the information they need to raise an alarm promptly if something goes wrong. And hiking with a companion or a group, particularly on remote or lightly traveled trails, adds both a layer of safety and the pleasure of shared experience. And carrying a fully charged phone or a satellite communication device in areas where cellular service may be limited gives you a means of reaching help even in places where ordinary phone calls do not connect, and being attentive to your surroundings on the trail. Noticing the other people present and trusting your instincts when something feels unusual or uncomfortable is a practice that serves hikers in all circumstances and in all locations. And the National Park Service, which manages Capitol Reef National Park and other public lands in the area, provides trail safety information on its website and at visitor centers. And local ranger stations are resources for anyone who has a safety concern before or during a visit to these areas. And if you experience a threatening situation in an outdoor setting, contacting 911 is always the first step. And the broader conversation that this case invites is a conversation about the safety of women in all environments, on trails and at home, and in the communities where they live and work. And organizations, including the National Domestic Violence Hotline, reachable at 1-800-799-7233, and local victim advocacy organizations in Utah provide support and resources for women who feel unsafe in any context. And the lesson of March 4th is not that the outdoors is dangerous or that women should limit themselves to safer spaces. The lesson is that community and connection and mutual awareness are the things that keep people safe. That checking on a neighbor, sharing your plans, paying attention to what feels wrong, reporting something unusual. These are the practices that create safety together. And the rain falls and we sit with that thought as we move toward the close of tonight's story. 3 women of 3 generations, one in her 30s and one in her 60s and one in her 80s, were taken from the world on March 4th, 2025, in the canyon country of southern Utah. And the weight of that loss is not diminished by the fact that we do not yet know their names, because their names are known to the people who loved them. And those people are carrying this right now, tonight, in the particular way that grief occupies the body and the mind in its earliest and most acute stage. And the tribute that these 3 women deserve is not primarily a monument or a news story or a moment of public attention, though all of those things have their proper place. The tribute they deserve is something more enduring and more difficult, something that lives in the choices that communities make about how they look after one another, in the practices that individuals adopt that create a web of safety and attention around the people they care for, in the conversations that this story opens about the safety of women in outdoor spaces and in their own homes. And the woman in her 30s was building something when her life was interrupted, was in the middle of the active, accumulating work of a life in its second decade, and she deserved the full unfolding of everything she was becoming. And the woman in her 60s was living with the particular richness that 6 decades of experience provides. The richness of someone who has earned a deep and nuanced relationship with the world she inhabits. And she deserved the years of continued deepening that were still ahead of her. More mornings on trails that she had learned to appreciate with 60 years of knowing what a trail can give you. And the woman in her 80s had lived an entire century in miniature, had witnessed and navigated and survived more than any younger person can fully imagine. And she was at home, which is precisely where a woman in her 80s in a small Utah community should be allowed to be safely, and all 3 of them deserved more time. And all 3 of them are gone now. And the world is diminished by their absence in ways that can never be fully measured or fully repaired. And the landscape where 2 of them were found, the canyon country of Wayne County, with its red rock formations and its wide sky and its trails that wind through terrain that has been accumulating its layers for millions of years, that landscape will continue as it always has, patient and ancient and indifferent to the human stories that play out within it. And yet the people who walk those trails in the weeks and months ahead will walk them with a different awareness, will carry in their bodies a knowledge of what happened there. And that knowledge does not have to be a reason to walk less or to love the land less. It can be a reason to walk more attentively and more gratefully, to insist through presence that these spaces belong to everyone, and that everyone who enters them deserves to return safely. And Capitol Reef and Canyonlands, the great parks that anchor the landscape of Wayne County, are places where the geological scale of time makes human lifetimes feel simultaneously brief and precious. And the 3 women who died on March 4th were part of that landscape, in the way that people who love a place become part of it, through their repeated presence and through their attention and through the ongoing choice to return again and again to a place that gives them something that nowhere else quite can. And we honor that relationship by telling their story clearly and by carrying their memory forward with care and the legal process underway, with a suspect in custody and a thorough investigation ongoing across multiple agencies, represents the beginning of accountability. And accountability is not the same as restoration. It cannot give back what was taken. It cannot return the decades ahead of the woman in her 30s or the years ahead of the woman in her 60s or the quiet remaining time that belonged to the woman in her 80s. But it is the best response the law can offer, and we receive it as a beginning. And I want you to pause here for just a moment and sit with all 3 of these women. And the rain outside continues to fall softly and continuously, and we stay with them. And we say clearly and without qualification that their lives mattered and that their story deserved to be told with every ounce of care we could bring to it. And the families receiving news of their deaths tonight are in the deepest part of a grief that will take a long time to move through and that will never entirely resolve. And we hold space for that grief with full respect and with the understanding that nothing we say can lighten it, but that saying these three women's lives mattered, saying it clearly and saying it tonight, is the least we can do. And the rain falls, and we close this chapter gently and with love for these three women whose names we do not yet know, but whose lives we have done our best tonight to honor. And so we arrive at the end of tonight's story, and we arrive here with three women from the canyon country of southern Utah, still present in our minds and in our hearts. Three women of three different generations whose lives ended in a place of extraordinary natural beauty and whose story deserved to be told with all the care and all the quiet that a story like this requires. And we have tried to do that tonight, to move through what happened with the pace and the respect that these three women deserve, without rushing and without sensationalizing and without losing sight for a single moment of who the story actually belongs to. And I want you now to let your body settle a little more deeply into wherever you are resting, to feel the weight of this evening releasing gently from your shoulders and from your chest, to hear the rain outside, soft and steady and continuous. The same rain that has been falling through every moment of this story. And to know as you rest that the world is carrying this forward, that investigators and prosecutors and advocates and community members in Wayne County are carrying it forward on behalf of these three women, that justice is being pursued with care and with thoroughness. And I will be here tomorrow night with another story, told at this same unhurried pace and with this same commitment to the people at the center of it. And you do not need to carry all of this right now. You can set it down gently beside you and let yourself rest, and the rain will stay with you through the night, falling softly and without urgency as it has been, falling all evening, and somewhere in the canyon country of southern Utah, the red rock stands as it has always stood, patient and ancient and enduring through everything that has happened beneath it, and everything that will happen yet. And the trails are quiet tonight, and the sky above them is wide and dark and full of stars that the city never shows you. And the three women who loved that land are remembered, and you can sleep now, gently and peacefully. And the rain will continue to fall through the night, and tomorrow will come, and I will be here.